Hello, it's Blue Orange 22. I want to do a reaction video to the Women's March in Los Angeles yesterday. If you look at my past two videos, I went to the Women's March in Los Angeles yesterday, and I had a few discussions with some of the feminist marchers there. And as you can see from the title of this video, unfortunately, a lot of those discussions were not good. And I've kind of been forced to reevaluate how I imagine the average feminist to be. Because something I've talked about on previous videos is how the men's rights movement is not against the idea of feminism. We're not against the principles of feminism. And I think there's a lot of people who call themselves feminists who would probably agree with the vast majority of what I say and with what MRAs say, because we really do feel that we just believe in basic equality and basic human rights and basic justice. But I have to be honest, some of my experiences and conversations yesterday really kind of made me reevaluate that. And unfortunately in a negative way, because I heard a lot of very toxic and very hypocritical things. And the thing is, the reason why I think it was fair for me to go to a women's march and talk about men's rights and have a men's rights sign is because feminists tell us that the men's rights movement shouldn't even exist at all. And they say that feminism helps men too, and the only thing we need for equality is feminism, and we don't need a men's rights movement. Okay, if that's true, then there's nothing wrong at all with going to a march for equality and talking about men's issues. If you say that you are the ones who are going to take care of men's issues, then it's completely fair game to bring up at a women's march or at a feminist march. Now, I completely agree. If you say, well, a women's march should be about women and feminism should be about women, that's completely fair. Just don't tell us that we shouldn't even be allowed to exist. Don't attack us just for trying to exist. But anyway, and I also want to make something clear. This was not everybody. I did have positive conversations as well, and I did meet plenty of feminist marchers who were the decent, average feminist that I always imagined. Because I've always thought that, again, most feminists are decent people who would agree with most things that MRAs would say. That's always kind of the perception that I had, and it's more like the organizations and the politics and the misconceptions that kind of get in the way. But unfortunately, there were a lot of negative conversations as well, and I'm going to get into some of them. Firstly, when I talked about male victims of domestic violence, I had so many feminists, when I said that, outright mocked, basically just laughed at the issue. And some of the quotes that I heard, one of them said, if a man complains about domestic violence, he's a pussy. Another one was basically bragging, saying, oh yeah, I hit my boyfriend if I feel like it. It's not a big deal. And then another one said, if a woman gets physical with her man, then he probably deserved it. And she said that in a group of about 4 or 5 women, and they all laughed. Is that a progressive, equal position to have? Is that really helping men too? Because if you say that you oppose gender roles, how can you think domestic violence against one gender is funny or okay? That's not opposing gender roles, that's enforcing gender roles. And then I talked to some who, they didn't agree. They didn't laugh or mock male victims per se, but it's like they couldn't bring themselves to say, oh yes, I agree, it's wrong. They always had some kind of circular answer, kind of dancing around the point. They couldn't bring themselves to just say, oh yes, domestic violence against men is wrong. It was something that was just against their values to actually say. They didn't want to admit it, but they couldn't bring themselves to actually say it. And in my approaches, about half the time I was actually the one approached. People saw my sign here and they actually came up to me. But when I approached people and asked them, I wasn't aggressive, I wasn't hostile, I wasn't standoffish. I would just say, hey, can I ask you about your sign? What do you think about this? So, it just like, you have to understand how, for a man to hear that, you can't really expect me to be like enthusiastic about feminism. You have to understand why I'm going to oppose that. And then another thing that kind of annoyed me, I saw there were these three women, and two of them had signs. One of them said "No vagina, no opinion," and one of them had a sign saying "My body, my choice." And so I was talking to them about body autonomy, and I says, well, would you agree that circumcising a baby boy when he's born is a violation of body autonomy? One of them laughed, and one of them said, well, it's better because it looks better. And then one of them, yeah, that's not really a serious issue. Well, I find that incredibly hypocritical, because it's not your body, so why should it be your choice? You have a sign saying no vagina, no opinion. Well, imagine like the reverse. Well, no penis, no opinion, because you weren't born a boy, so it's not something that happened to you. It's not something that affected you, and it really shouldn't be up to you. It's not really about you. And when I said that, one of them said, well, that's kind of sexist. That's absolutely not sexist. If you are a woman, it's not the same thing. You don't really have like an equal opinion as a man on something that happens to men, on an irreversible operation on the male organ, right? It's not about you. It doesn't happen to you. It's not your body, so it really shouldn't be your choice. And that's something that I haven't talked about yet, but circumcision is something that MRAs and feminists argue about a lot, and I think they're very hypocritical when they talk about body autonomy. But causing an irreversible loss of erogenous tissue to a newborn baby who obviously can't consent and can never fix it, how is that not a violation of body autonomy? Isn't that violating my body, my choice? But because it's something that happens to men, it's either funny or not a big deal to them. And they, as women, decide that. And again, not everyone said that. I had some feminists agree with me. But that was just something that kind of stuck out to me as just hypocritical. So overall, the experience, sorry, I know I'm still sick, and I know I still kind of sound like crap, but I just wanted to get this out today. Overall, the experience wasn't all bad, because again, I did have some good conversations, and I do think I had some kind of positive breakthroughs, if you will, where we found a lot of common ground. So, and also, to be fair, I mean, it's like, if I go up to someone holding a sign, I did look for people who seemed to be, more engaged, or I guess more dedicated, more hardcore. Maybe that's not the right word, but I can't think right now. So I was probably getting a somewhat more toxic sample size than the general population. But that being said, it wasn't that hard to find those kinds of toxic views. Like I was talking about the education gap. How boys are behind in school, boys are getting lower grades, boys actually get discriminated against in grading, and boys are less likely to go to college, and how it's causing this whole problem, young men being unemployed, young men living at home. I had some people agree, but I talked to a family. There were two parents there, and they had like a 16-year-old daughter and like an 8-year-old son, and they knew nothing about it at all. And they were saying, oh, I'm pretty sure that's not true. And it's like, you have an 8-year-old son. It's like, I know these parents are good parents, and I know, of course, they want the best for their son, but they don't even know. They're not even aware. And it's because it's something that you will never hear in a feminist space, talking about the boys' education gap. It's not something that they're going to talk about. It's why we need a men's rights movement to talk about men's issues feminists are not going to talk about. And then one of the answers that I got when I was talking about, the boys' education gap and, young men struggling in education and college was, oh, if men fall behind for a while, it's a good thing to help us catch up. You know what? I'm 25 years old. I wasn't alive 50 years ago or 200 years ago. I'm alive now. And my life really does not have to be a punishment for you. And that 8-year-old boy, his life doesn't have to be a punishment for you either. So, anyway, that's my reaction. So tell me your thoughts below.